In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
But I do ask every publisher, every editor, and every newsman in the nation to re-examine his own standards and to recognize the nature of our country's peril. In time of war, the government and the press have customarily joined in an effort based largely on self-discipline to prevent unauthorized disclosures to the enemy. In times of clear and present danger, the courts have held that even the privileged rights of the First Amendment must yield to the public's need for national security. Today, no war has been declared, and however fierce the struggle may be, it may never be declared in the traditional fashion. Our way of life is under attack. Those who make themselves our enemy are advancing around the globe. The survival of our friends is in danger, and yet no war has been declared. No borders have been crossed by marching troops. No missiles have been fired. If the press is awaiting a declaration of war before it imposes the self-discipline of combat conditions, then I can only say that no war ever posed a greater threat to our security. If you are awaiting a finding of clear and present danger, then I can only say that the danger has never been more clear, and its presence has never been more imminent.
It's time to recognize that we've come to a turning point. We're threatened with an economic calamity of tremendous proportions, and the old business-as-usual treatment can't save us. Together, we must chart a different course. We must increase productivity. That means making it possible for industry to modernize and make use of the technology which we ourselves invented. That means putting Americans back to work, and that means, above all, bringing government spending back within government revenues, which is the only way, together with increased productivity, that we can reduce and, yes, eliminate inflation.
The only thing that can stop this corrupt machine is you. The only force strong enough to save our country is us. The only people brave enough to vote out this corrupt establishment is you, the American people. I'm doing this for the people and for the movement, and we will take back this country for you, and we will make America great again.
Hello, welcome back to Inform America. My name is Rich Merritt, your host. Also hosting today is Pat Murphy. Welcome back, Pat. Before we get started with the show, I'd like to ask a couple of things. Number one is to check out the nationallibertyalliance.org and support their efforts to restore the rule of law in America. How can you go wrong? The only way they're going to accomplish it is if you get behind them, because it's your law. It's your government. Anyway, it's nationallibertyalliance.org. Secondarily, check out the Boston Broadside. I tout this newspaper because they're being honest with us, the American people. And some of the rag sheets that we have in New England are just that, rag sheets. Why would I support somebody who lies to me? I want the truth. I don't want to be lied to. And the Boston Broadside's that newspaper, at least one of them. So please check them out. One of them in New England. So please check them out. And thirdly, I'd like to ask you to check out my book, Stand Your Ground. I think the title is appropriate for today. All of us need to stand our ground. But check the book out, if you would, please. I'd appreciate it. You can find it on Amazon, or there'll be a flyer put up. Oh, excuse me. A flyer put up today, so you can check it out. There's a link there to go to. With that, one of the topics that we're going to start off talking about is the red flag laws that they're seemingly coming out with all over the country. And Pat, I'll turn it over to you if you want to get it started.
Okay.
Sure, there's nothing to talk about there, right?
Well, there's
Yeah.
so much. There's so much to talk about, and these red flag laws, as you know, they're popping up all over the country, and the people walking in doing these presentations. So it's like in New Hampshire State House. You look at half of them, and you wonder who's supporting it, because surely they're incapable of writing half of them. Looking at the legislation. But if you looked at New Hampshire, what happened up here the last time they had it, they had an amendment to the bill. They were voting on it to bring the bill to the floor. And that amendment, we had to wait for that. There was some 6,000 words that contradicted most of what was in there. But basically, they're an assault on multiple parts of the Constitution. They're totally unconstitutional. My understanding is we just had a couple more people killed because of a red flag law. I'm not sure what state it was in, but somebody maliciously dropped a dime on someone, and a force went out, and there was gunfire, and you got a couple of people dead. So pay attention, because you can see it happening now in Virginia, where you've got a governor who is an extreme radical, Governor Northam. He's the guy that wants to kill kids at birth or even after birth. And, of course, the Democrats now control the Senate and the House down there. And all of a sudden they're going full hog for all-out gun control, and they're talking about developing plans for full-scale gun confiscation. So it's a real problematic thing. I was just in Virginia a couple of weeks ago. It's a beautiful state. You got a lot of nice people, and a long tradition of firearms ownership. And what you're seeing is a reaction all the way across Virginia, and of course many states that abut Virginia, and that you have counties where sheriffs are saying they will not comply with gun confiscations, and it's absolutely and totally unconstitutional.
Aside from that, though, and by the way, do you mind if I do this now with the
No,
Constitution?
go ahead. Do what you
thing?
want to do,
Okay.
Rich.
Then I'd like to have the attachment put up that I sent, and I'd like to talk about it for 2 or 3 minutes. The constitutions, both state and federal, are up on the screen. And the Second Amendment to the United States Constitution, a well-regulated militia being necessary for the security of this free state, comma. They're talking about the militia. It says militia. It doesn't say anything else other than militia. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. It's very clear. An infringement means they're going to it. They're going near it. They're doing something. They can do nothing. You can't infringe or encroach upon your Second Amendment rights. And they're not your Second Amendment rights. One of the things I wanted to make clear is the Bill of Rights, whether it's a state or federal constitution, is a bill of prohibition that the people, or in the case of the federal government, the states, have given to the government, saying, do not infringe upon the rights of our people. That's why they're the Bill of Rights. We're telling the government, don't infringe upon them. You can see what the rights say. In the state of New Hampshire, it clearly says the right of the people to protect themselves, their family, their property, and the state. It doesn't say, or the state or federal, unless the legislature decides to change it. I wonder why that is. Because they don't have the authority to do that. However, they're doing it. And if you look at the 10th Amendment, the powers not granted to the federal government are retained to the state and or the people. It's very clear. So if we're not giving them the power to change it, why are they changing it? The short, quick answer is the Constitution's dead. Your government isn't the government anymore. It's a corporation. And I know it sounds crazy, but it's true. You have to pay attention, and you have to look into these matters to find out. The Organic Act of 1871 made the United States a corporation. That was after the war. The bankers took over. The banks, the bar, and the IRS own this country. That's my opinion, those three things.
Let me add.
You can go a little further, yeah.
Let me just add to that, Rich, if I could. A lot of people will point to the Second Amendment, and they think that we get our right from that we're protected. We get the right from the writing of the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and specifically the Second Amendment. That's not what's going on. The Second Amendment simply proclaims to the people, to the world, that this government is organized under the age-old known principle a natural law right of self-defense. So it's a right that pre-exists even government. It's innate in the human being by nature of their humanity. So it's a God-given right. It's an absolute right, and it can't be taken away. So these people say, well, they'll get rid of the Second Amendment. It's not going to happen. It doesn't happen. It's a natural God-given right. If you don't have that right, then you might as well. You have no rights at all. There's nothing. There's simply
They
nothing.
can take away the Second Amendment if they want. They can take away all the amendments. Matter of fact, they have taken them all. But my right to protect myself is still there. That's me talking. I mean, would you allow somebody to come up and start punching you in the face and you just sit there going, when's it going to be over?
Well, look at these.
Or you to defend yourself. I mean, I'm being serious. It's just a common sense question, you know.
Well, look at these countries where they've been disarmed all over Europe. You look at the mass rape. You look at the riots. You look at the people assaulted. You look at London Bridge last week, where this guy goes out and he decides, I'm going to chop some people up. So he sharpens up a knife and he goes out and he stabs probably about 10 people, kills 2. And what did the British authorities have for a slogan for the young people in the school? Run, hide, tell. So what happened in that incident where he was stopped was you had a cook come out of a restaurant, and it had a narwhal on the sign. He broke off the tusk and he walloped this guy. And he was from Poland, naturally. So the Polish schools have a different model. It's called left, right, uppercut. So they're being trained. The people are being trained to be docile, and they're being trained psychologically. They're being prepped to be conquered. That's what you've seen all over Europe, and you can see it in the United States now. It would have something to do, I think, with probably almost 78% of the educators in America being female. So it's like there's an emotional appeal for disarmament, which is a lot of it is not logical when you really, really think about it. But that's what's being used. Most of these people in the different state legislatures right now, Moms Against Action, there's a prime group right there. And you can watch them in the State House taking selfies, and everything's a big joke. And this is anything but a joke right now.
You can't, I'll say this, you can't get more serious than what's happening in America today. By the way, the country was cooed a long time ago by the banks and the bar. That's historic. It's documented. You could look it up. What's happening right now is that they're going after America, but they've got a lasso around the rest of the world, the rest of the planet. And if they can take America, they're going to take it all. It's all or nothing.
Well, you're watching all these currency wars that are going on right now. You're watching the development of the BRICS nation. There's almost 34 countries in there right now. And what's happening is those people are saying we no longer want to be part of this system, especially the one that emanated from the end of the Second World War, from Bretton Woods. We don't want to have to accept a debt element, a debt note. We want to have a system where the currency is backed by something of real value, gold, silver, or something of worth. So the whole system is based on a debt system, and that goes back to the Federal Reserve, 1913.
Yeah.
You mentioned the country was incorporated after the Civil War. The American Revolutionary War debt came in that time period. And the country went through a thing called the Organic Act, and it changed the entire nature of the system. The United States became a corporate entity. But, of course, the average person was never really shown that. So when you're taught in the high school, when you deal with Reconstruction, you're thinking, oh, this must have to do with Sherman's March to the Sea, Atlanta burning, all the different towns in the South being devastated and then being rebuilt. And the reality is it's about restructuring the United States and going from the original Confederation to a federal republic with a limited amount of power for the federal government to a corporate entity. And then by the time you get to 1913, these bankers are coming on full force, and they're going to seize the ability to create the currency. And in that way, what they'll have is they'll take what was the strongest monetary item in the world at that time. Everybody wanted the dollar, and they will totally destroy that. And by doing that, they're going to elicit more wealth for themselves and power for themselves. And that's what happened in 1913 with the creation of the Federal Reserve.
Well, if you have situations like Ruby Ridge, Waco, Robert Lavoie Finicum, who was murdered 2016, I believe, January.
Yeah.
All of these people who committed these heinous crimes haven't been brought to justice at all. Nobody's been tried for them because there is no law. There is no land jurisdiction, a court of record, common law, natural law, whatever you want to call it, in America today. It's the organized crime that has taken over our country is running the courts. And you people out there some of you have been on the show with the family court system and whatnot. That's trafficking in kids through the
right.
foster program and all this stuff.
All right, it's all money. Every bit of it's about money.
Corporations,
They took over. What they did was they granted us the great service of giving us permission to crank out our money out of the Treasury, and they would charge us massive interest. Great service, huh? And what they did in a period
You could have got it for free, though, Pat. Who wants it for free? Jesus, come on.
Inside of 19 years, they bankrupted the United States intentionally. So what they did was because the United States had been incorporated in 1870, they took an insolvent, bankrupt corporation, all right? And they attached themselves to it. They made all of us debtors. Every one of us became debtors in 1933. With President Roosevelt. And at that point, what they did was the bankers said, what will you have for a surety on a debt? A surety being somebody that is forced to pay another's debt. We'll say, we'll take the labor of and sweat equity of the American people, and we'll use that. And that's what happened. That's why.
We'll show you how much power we gave those people, Pat. The Rothschilds, I can't remember which one it was now, but it was 100 years ago, threatened the Tsar of Russia and then carried it out. A banker carried it out and had him and his family wiped out. I mean, what do you need to know? These people, when you control money, you print whatever you want and then you start throwing it around because it doesn't mean anything. We're paying the interest. We're paying for it. So keep paying your money to the Federal Reserve Bank and all that stuff. That's where it goes.
That's why they hate. That's why they hate Putin. You look at Putin, and he's inside a vault with stacks of real gold, and he's telling the Russian people, we're struggling out of this. We've annihilated a lot of our best people in a communist revolution. He said, but we are going to have something because our currency, and we're looking to do something on the world market and getting away from the American dollar. As a world currency is we're getting away from this, and the guy's doing monumental things, but he's caricatured through the and lambasted in the American media because the same bankers here that run that fiat currency system, they own all the media, they own the magazines, they own the colleges, they own the foundations. You watch all of this. My understanding is Lisa Page now is supposed to work for Harvard. You try to overturn a legitimately elected president, and then you're rewarded by that, by an institution that's part of it. It seems that's what I hear. I need to verify that, but I've heard that. I don't doubt it for 1 second. Watching what's going on.
No.
But there's a guy that's he's built over 5,000 churches, opened thousands of monasteries, and he's becoming the leader of the Christian world. And is saying, along with people like Orban, the only thing we can do is to re-Christianize the West if you're going to save the West. Otherwise, we're going to be done.
Well, I just wanted to mention a couple things. The Grace Commission was convened by Reagan, and that they made a determination back then that the taxes that you pay on your paycheck, which you don't have to pay, by the way, because there is no tax on your time and labor, your wages and compensation. Income is defined as gains from corporate activity, not swapping here's 40 hours worth of work, 40 hours worth of pay. It's an even exchange. That's all it is. No matter what the amount is, you agreed to it with your employer. You don't have to pay a tax. But we paid a tax to the Federal Reserve Bank because, well, it's at the point of a gun. They force you to do it, okay? Which I don't know why people continue to do it.
We're the debtor. We're the debtor, and they play this little game. Our guys in the Congress talk about raising the debt ceiling. We don't have anything to do with it. That's a creditor that's saying, you do this now, so here we are, we're in debt. If we if we cranked out more money to pay some debt, we're going to pay more interest to them, so we're locked in. And now suddenly, even though you're in debt trillions of dollars, you're sending out hundreds of billions across the world in foreign aid. That's because the orders are coming down from the creditor to the debtor. That's who we are. That's what they made. That's what they made us. And so they attach all the resources now. They see you as a resource. When they use the word chattel, they're saying that's a movable property that's liened. That's you and that's I. That's what the birth certificate is. Well, that's what that's all about.
You are a human resource. If you got a question at work, you call human resources because that's what you are.
You get a monetary worth attached to yourself. It used to be in the hundreds of thousands. I don't know if it's a million yet.
Yeah, it
but
is.
That's what they did. So that's why when people pull up that QSIP number, that commercial trading number on the real birth certificate, you wind up calling that number. You get the New York Stock Exchange because you're traded with probably 24, 25 other people as a group.
I just wanted to say something about the debt ceiling for anybody listening here. That the debt ceiling is something that it's a big facade. It's a dog and pony show with the people in Congress, because the debt ceiling is always going to go up. It can never go down. Not now, anyway, because we're paying so much in interest we can't afford to make it come down.
Mm-hmm.
It's impossible. And they keep printing the money and they keep charging us. Nobody knows how much is printed. They say, yeah, we just did $1 billion or $20 billion. Okay, we got to pay you the interest. And we're paying them interest, but it still goes up. It's ludicrous.
See if you can find. It's be impossible to get the book because it's so expensive, but some people do have it. Philip Drew, administrator, on Colonel Edwin Mandel House. He was a bigwig from Texas, the guy that made governorships all over the place in the South, and became an advisor to Wilson and especially to FDR. But he wrote a book called Philip Drew, Administrator, and in that he talks about a revolution in the country and a benevolent dictator coming to power, and then through a series of his own executive actions changes the nature of the country. And you can tell the guy he's basically saying, I'm a Marxist, but I do some things different here, would inject some other things and a spiritual element into what the nation's going to be. He really affected FDR. And this is the guy where Wilson on his deathbed says, I made an enormous mistake. I destroyed my own country, letting these people come in. I had something written supposedly by him, and I'll read it very quickly, though I have to see where they get this from, because it's almost too blatant to really believe that this guy would come out and actually say something like this to Woodrow Wilson, and Wilson put it down in his own personal notes. But a lot of this stuff did come true. It's already come true, and it's pretty shocking when you listen to it. So I'll read it. I think we may have done a portion of this at one time. Yeah, but this is the guy that was he pushed the CFR. He was involved in the League of Nations, a prototype to the United Nations. He's very much pro-Marxist, etc. He's a powerful, powerful insider. He's involved in the creation of the Federal Reserve. It says, very soon Americans will be required to register their biological property, that's your kids, in a national system designed to keep track of people and will operate under the ancient system of pledging. By such methodology, we can compel people to submit to our agenda, which will affect our security as a chargeback for our fiat paper currency. Every American will be forced to register or suffer being able to work and earn a living. They will be our chattels. We talked about chattel, okay, your movable property that's liened. They will be our chattels, and we will hold the security interest over them forever by operation of the law merchant under the scheme of secured transactions, under merchant law, not common law, okay? Americans, by unknowingly or unwittingly delivering the bills of lading, that's going to be your birth certificate, which you sign it. That's a fraud right there. We don't understand what that is, and it's written on security paper. Americans, by unknowing or unwittingly delivering the bills of lading to us, will be rendered bankrupt and insolvent. Secured by their pledges, they will be stripped of their rights and given a commercial value designed to make us a profit, and they will be none the wiser, for not one man in a million could ever figure out our plans, and if by accident one or two ever figure it out, we will have an arsenal of plausible deniability. After all, this is the only logical way to fund government, by floating liens and debts to the registrants in the form of benefits and privileges. This will inevitably reap us huge profits beyond our wildest expectations and leave every American a contributor to this fraud, which we shall call social insurance. Without realizing it, every American will unknowingly be our servant. However, begrudgingly, the people will become helpless and without any hope for their redemption, and we will employ the high office, meaning the presidency, of our dummy corporation, the United States, to foment this plot against America. Well, that's out there. I need to see that in the actual Woodrow Wilson diaries or presidential papers, but all of that stuff came true. There's no question it came true.
Well, I was just going to say that, Pat. Not regardless, but I know what you're saying about did he say it or didn't he say it. But what is said there has come true.
Yeah,
It's all true.
And a whole slew of them. If you
And
look
that
at
was written 100 years ago.
yeah, but that's the whole thing. Is all those ideas are they're so strong, they're so powerful. Right at that time, that's before the Russian Revolution. He's writing a lot of this stuff. He's writing right before World War I. With Edward Mandell House, and these guys are very much involved in eugenics. The United States was in the forefront of eugenics. I mean, they talk about Germany and things that happened at Nuremberg and how could this happen. So we were bigger than anybody in terms of sterilizing people, and the whole idea that you're going to create a superior race of people. I mean, these guys look at themselves as though they're absolutely superior. They're at the top of the feeding chain, and everybody else is merely property. So it's easy to dispense with us. Same with H.G. Wells. I mean, he was talking about literally poisoning people. As a middle class started to develop, became a threat to their position. It says there must be a way to eradicate the population.
Unbelievable.
It's unbelievable.
It's like Bloomberg. I mean, here's a guy who's telling people how they should live their lives.
Right.
And he's got 11 homes and 6 boats and 2 jets or 5 jets. I mean,
40. Hey, you can take light rail traffic. You can take light rail, Richie. Go on the MTA or the bus. He's got 42 automobiles.
Yeah.
Okay. They're all part of the club. They're all part of that club, and we're not in it, and we know we're not in it.
Well, let's have can you do a quick correlation? We only got a few minutes, Pat. Quick correlation between the Bolshevik Revolution and what's happening in America, if you can do it briefly.
Well, there's a lot. You can go. There's a lot of different ways that you can go. You could look
so
at
people can see it today.
Well, you know something. We'll do it. How much time do we have left?
2 minutes.
Very, very quickly, the prime example of a communist takeover as applied to the United States was the fall of Czechoslovakia between 1945 and 1948. That became the best example on the communist side of a model they would apply to America. Czechoslovakia was created out of the First World War in the Treaty of Versailles, and it was the crown jewel of their creation. You had a nation with a very educated population, a lot of heavy industry, particularly metallurgy. And what you had at the end of the war, once Nazi Germany was defeated, you had a very bad taste in the average Czechs' mouth for the West. They were sold out at Munich. They weren't happy with Chamberlain. They weren't happy with Francis Daladier. And what you had communists in there secretly pretending to be patriots. And they developed what you'd call parallel institutions, like we have the SES here in the United States with 8,000 of these people, 7,000 of whom were appointed by Obama. So they operate behind the scenes. And then what they did was they embarked on a course where they would destroy the currency of the nation, create crisis. They trained some military groups that seemed inept and were subject to ridicule at first, like Antifa. But within 3 years, they became an effective element. They consolidated their police forces. They put them into mobile units so they could move on the population when the time was right. And they cashiered out any Czech that was a true patriot that had fought hard against the Germans. And they brought in military people that had done virtually nothing, didn't have a career, and they put them into positions of authority. Then within the media, they put the dominant people on the communist side. They hid their real objectives and who they were. Went into the media, they controlled newspapers, and they had their unions control, the communist-controlled unions control the transport and dispersal of paper. And one of the last things that they did was to get the younger people on their side. Naturally, they did like they did in this country here. Look at Pelosi saying we're going to reduce the age of voting to 16 so to get all the high schools to vote.
Yeah.
And what they did was they changed the age from 21 to 18 years old. They started a crisis, and they were able to seize power with a multi-group government that was eventually turned hardcore communist, and it was their best. They were their most successful run. They call that the Kozak model. It came from one of their historians who wrote a letter that snuck out to the West called the Kozak Memorandum. Well, try to do that fast, but it's
no. You know, I know we have. We're running out of time, but please subscribe to this channel, like us on Facebook, YouTube, whatever. Support the book if you would, please. And I'm going to steal this from Tom D'Ambra, who's on YouTube also. Yeah. This is your government. Take responsibility for it. Have a good night and God bless.
What's going on? That's a good one, Tom D'Ambra.